Like I said, sir, your funds are frozen, it doesn't matter what it's for, I can't do anything about it. That's what the teller told him. Arthur Harrison, 78, retired Marine, standing there trying to get money for his wife's medication. But what happens when a system fails a hero? No help, no compassion, just a pamphlet and a seat in the corner. But 7 minutes later, the CEO himself walked through the doors and everything changed. Can one call change an entire bank? Because some people don't ask for special treatment, they've already earned it. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The bank lobby was quiet that morning, just the steady shuffle of papers, the faint hum of printers, and the soft clink of coins dropping into a tray. Outside, the sky hung low with early spring clouds. Inside, the air was still almost indifferent. At the counter stood a man, Arthur Harrison, 78 years old, coat buttoned to the neck, back slightly curved, but posture still upright. He handed over his withdrawal slip and bank card with steady hands. "Arthur Harrison," he said politely, "400, please." The young teller didn't look up. He wore a perfectly pressed shirt and a name tag that read K. Morris. His fingers danced across the keyboard, eyes flicking from the monitor to Arthur's card. Then he stopped typing. A frown crept in. He typed again, waited, then exhaled. "There's a temporary hold on your account, sir," he said, voice flat. Arthur blinked. "I'm sorry, there's a system flag, some internal security protocol. It's automatic. Your funds are currently frozen. I can't process any transactions." Arthur leaned in, careful not to raise his voice. "My pension was deposited this morning. I checked before I left the house." "Yes, I see the deposit," the teller replied, "but the system's flagged it until the central processor clears it. There's nothing we can do." "For how long?" "Typically 24 to 48 business hours." Arthur stared at him. "My wife is ill. We need the medication today, not tomorrow, not in 3 days." The teller hesitated, then slid a pamphlet across the counter. It had a picture of a smiling customer service rep and the words, "We're here to help. You can try calling the helpline," he said, "but I wouldn't expect a different answer." Arthur didn't pick up the pamphlet, his fingers curled lightly against the edge of the counter. "I've banked here for 37 years, he said quietly. "There's never been a hold before." The teller gave a small shrug. "These updates just rolled out. It's for customer safety. It's not personal." Arthur let out a slow breath. "It feels personal when my wife can't breathe without her treatment." Across the lobby, a manager's office sat empty, a glass door, a nameplate, but no one behind the desk. When Arthur asked to speak with someone in charge, the teller didn't even glance up. "She's in a regional meeting all day, and even if she were here, the hold is tied to corporate systems. No one here can override it." Arthur stood still for a moment, then quietly stepped away. He didn't make a scene, didn't argue. He walked to a padded bench near the entrance and sat down slowly, hands resting on his knees. The other customers kept chatting. A mother helped her daughter into a seat. A man filled out a deposit slip. The world continued unaware. Arthur looked down at his phone, not the bank helpline. He knew how that would go. Endless menus, elevator music, a voice reading from a script. Instead, he opened his contacts. One number sat near the top, labeled only Sterling Private. He hadn't dialed it in 15 years. Not since the emergency simulation they'd both participated in, Arthur as a logistics advisor, Sterling as a young executive. Observing the chain of command during national crisis drills. At the time, they'd shaken hands and exchanged contact info out of respect. "Use it only if it's serious," Sterling had said. "A real failure in the system." Arthur looked at the teller, still typing behind the counter. Then he thought of his wife, Martha, sitting at home in her recliner, struggling to catch a full breath. He pressed the call button. One ring, then a voice answered. Sterling. Arthur's own voice was calm. "James, it's Arthur Harrison, eh?" Pause. "Harrison," the voice said. "God, I haven't heard that name in years. What's going on?" Arthur explained the situation plainly: the deposit, the hold, the need for medication. The teller's response, the absence of a manager, the pamphlet, the silence on the other end wasn't passive, it was focused. "I'm looking at your account now," Sterling said. "This shouldn't have happened. The new patch triggered a security flag. Bad code. Pension accounts should have been exempt. Stay where you are. I'm 7 minutes away." The line went dead. Arthur lowered the phone and sat back. Across the lobby, the teller glanced over once, saw the old man sitting still, and went back to his screen. Another customer approached with a check. Life carried on. 6 minutes passed, then 7. At precisely minute 8, the main doors opened with a whisper of hydraulics. A man in a charcoal suit stepped inside, mid-50s, clean-cut, purpose in every step. James Sterling. No greetings, no delays. He moved directly toward the empty manager's office, scanning the room. Then he saw Arthur. "Mr. Harrison," he said firmly, "come with me, please." Behind him, 2 more people entered, an assistant and a man in a dark security blazer. Their expressions matched Sterling's, unreadable, focused. Sterling turned toward the teller counter. "You," he said, pointing at Kevin, manager. "Now you two." Kevin stood frozen, then moved. By the time the manager, Ms. Evans, returned from lunch, the lobby was silent. Customers watched, unsure what was happening. A few whispered, no one moved. Sterling was Waiting in the office, the door closed behind them. Outside, the lobby remained hushed. At the bench near the entrance, the pamphlet still sat untouched. The only sound was the soft click of a clock on the wall, ticking forward 1 second at a time, just like the system, until someone decided to break through. Behind the frosted glass of the manager's office, James Sterling stood tall, shoulders squared, jaw tight. The room wasn't large, but his presence filled it. Ms. Evans, the branch manager, had just stepped inside, her lunch still half finished somewhere down the street. Her eyes widened as she realized who was waiting. Kevin the teller hovered awkwardly near the desk, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He didn't speak. Sterling didn't sit. He didn't raise his voice either. He didn't have to. This morning, he began. A veteran walked into this branch, a longtime customer, a man whose pension was deposited, verified, and then flagged falsely by our system. Miss Evans tried to respond. Sir, it was a security hold, an automated update, a flag triggered by an untested software patch. Sterling interrupted. I'm well aware, but that's not what concerns me most. What concerns me is that no one in this room attempted to escalate the issue. Not when the man explained his wife needed critical medication, not when he asked repeatedly for help. He turned his gaze to Kevin. Did you attempt a manual verification? Kevin swallowed. I didn't know we could. I followed policy. Sterling's voice remained calm. Did you know about Directive 7 Alpha regarding pension accounts for military veterans? Kevin shook his head. Sterling turned to Miss Evans. And you? She hesitated. It hasn't been part of our current branch-level training. Then that, to Sterling said, is going to change immediately. Outside the office, the lobby was still. Customers lingered, pretending to study their phones or transaction slips, but their ears were tuned in. No one left. Everyone was waiting. Arthur sat quietly at the edge of the room, hands folded, face unreadable. He wasn't angry, he wasn't triumphant, he was patient, the kind of patience that didn't come from passivity, but from decades of living in systems where calm was survival. Arthur Harrison had spent over 30 years in logistics for the Marine Corps. He didn't see combat in the traditional sense, but he'd been in forward operating zones, coordinating supply lines under pressure, mapping routes in sandstorms, negotiating deliveries under fire. He never missed a deadline, never lost a shipment. His unit called him the quartermaster's ghost. He moved through problems without noise and got things done. When he retired, he did it without ceremony, no grand speeches, just a quiet exit and a folder full of discharge paperwork. He and his wife Martha settled into a modest apartment near the edge of town. There days were simple: coffee at dawn, pharmacy runs every other week, church on Sundays when Martha's lungs allowed. Her condition, chronic, progressive, meant their calendar revolved around appointments, breathing treatments, med refills, insurance paperwork. The pension wasn't large, but it was steady. Arthur tracked every cent. Grocery lists were mapped to weekly flyers, bills were paid the day they arrived, no shortcuts, no late fees, just discipline. And then this morning, that system failed, not because of fraud. Not because of anything Arthur had done, but because someone at corporate had pushed an update overnight and no one had tested how it would interact with veteran pension deposits. In the office, Sterling reached for his phone. This hold ends now, he said. He dialed a number. Internal, direct. This is Sterling. Lift the CPU flag on account ending in 4281. Immediate clearance. Yes, flag it for audit. I want a diagnostic report on my desk by noon. He hung up and looked at Arthur. Your account is now accessible. Arthur gave a small nod. Sterling continued, I'm also authorizing full reimbursement for today's medical costs for the next 12 months. Your wife's prescription copays will be covered by our executive discretionary fund. Neither Kevin nor Miss Evans said a word. Sterling wasn't finished. He turned back to them. This wasn't just a system glitch, this was a failure of human judgment. You were presented with a real person in a real crisis, and you chose to follow a script instead of exercising discretion. That's not a flaw in training, that's a flaw in culture, and that too is going to change. Ms. Evans nodded quickly, her face pale. Sterling looked to his assistant. Let HR and regional operations know this branch is under full performance review. He then turned to Arthur. I wish this hadn't happened, he said, but I'm grateful you brought it to my attention. Arthur didn't respond immediately. When he finally spoke, it was only to say, I hope it helps someone else, and then he stood outside. The lobby remained quiet as the door opened and Arthur stepped out. Several customers stepped aside, not out of fear, but with quiet respect. Sterling followed, paused at the teller line. To the remaining staff, he said only this, let today serve as a reminder, our systems exist to serve people, not the other way around. Then he left. Arthur walked out a few minutes later, envelope in hand. He didn't look back. Later that afternoon, the first National Fidelity servers recorded a flurry of internal activity. Policies were reviewed, flags adjusted, new protocols drafted, but in a modest apartment across town, none of that mattered. Arthur returned home with medication in hand. Martha asked no questions, just smiled as he filled the nebulizer. He sat beside her chair, the same place he always did. Routine restored, but something had shifted, not just for them, but for everyone who had watched the moment unfold, because sometimes change doesn't come from petitions or protests. Sometimes it comes from a single call to the right person at The right time, and a quiet man refusing to be dismissed. The main doors of the bank swung open with a soft pneumatic hiss. No one paid attention at first, just another customer, they thought, until they saw the man who entered. A tall, dark suit, precise movements, a face they'd seen before, though only in framed photographs lining the wall near the mortgage desk. James Sterling, the CEO. He didn't speak, didn't pause, didn't greet the staff or scan his surroundings with polite curiosity. He walked with direction. Each step measured, sharp, not rushed, but urgent in a way that turned heads. At the teller counter, Kevin froze mid-sentence. The customer in front of him turned, confused. Sterling's gaze cut through the lobby. He spotted Arthur first, still seated near the entrance, calm and composed, hands folded in his lap. Sterling nodded once, then turned. "Mr. Harrison," he said evenly, "if you'll follow me, please." Arthur rose without hesitation. Sterling continued walking, now toward the manager's office. Two individuals followed a step behind, one in a crisp gray suit, the other wearing a discreet earpiece. Sterling didn't introduce them. His voice rose only slightly, but it echoed in the sudden quiet. "You," he said, pointing to Kevin, "and you," to the returning branch manager just now arriving through the side entrance. Inside now, the air in the lobby shifted. People fell silent, phones were lowered, conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Every pair of eyes followed as the door to the office clicked shut. Inside, the atmosphere was colder. Sterling remained standing, his voice, when it came, wasn't angry. It was quiet, steady, controlled, and somehow far more dangerous because of it. "Tell me what happened," he said. Kevin glanced toward Miss Evans. The manager stepped forward. "We received a system flag this morning. CPU hold on a pension deposit. Policy requires us to wait for it to clear." Sterling's reply was instant. "What was the nature of the hold?" "Security update," Evans said. "It was applied overnight. Apparently the patch." "I know what the patch was," Sterling cut in. "I authorized the rollout. What I didn't authorize was allowing a misfire like this to block a veteran's pension, especially when his wife's medication depended on it." Kevin shifted uncomfortably. "I followed protocol, sir. I told him about the hold and gave him the customer helpline." Sterling turned his full attention to the young teller. "Did he tell you what the funds were for?" Kevin hesitated. "Yes, medication for his wife." "In your response, I said there was nothing we could do at the branch level." Sterling nodded once, then turned to the manager. "Did either of you attempt to verify the deposit manually? Did anyone call central processing? Did you reference the override policy for veteran accounts?" Neither answered it. Sterling's voice dropped a level lower. "You had a decorated Marine, a man who served this country for decades, standing in your lobby, calmly explaining the urgency of the situation, and you sent him away with a pamphlet." The silence grew heavier. Sterling stepped back. "This is not just a failure of code, it is a failure of principle. We don't exist to obey scripts, we exist to serve people, and you failed." He pulled out his phone and dialed. "This is Sterling. Lift the CPU hold on account 4281. Immediate clearance, yes. Priority status. Get me a full report on the flag trigger. I want names." He ended the call and looked at Arthur. "Mr. Harrison, your account is now fully restored. You may withdraw your funds at your convenience." Arthur gave a simple nod. Sterling wasn't finished. "We will also cover the cost of your wife's medication for the next 12 months, copays, delivery, and emergency prescriptions. Consider it a small apology." Arthur said nothing, just nodded, the gesture quiet but solid. Sterling then turned back to his staff. "You both will receive immediate retraining. Your understanding of policy will be reviewed and your fitness for customer-facing roles evaluated." Ms. Evans opened her mouth, but thought better of it. Sterling walked to the door and opened it. The lobby, still hushed, turned their eyes. "Mr. Harrison," he said gently, "would you allow Miss Evans to process your withdrawal now?" Arthur stepped forward. Kevin didn't look up. 20 minutes later, the transaction was complete. Arthur exited the branch with an envelope in hand. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't linger. He moved with the same quiet steadiness he always had. Inside, James Sterling addressed the remaining staff. "No script, no memo, no PR, just a few words. Our technology is here to support judgment," he said, "not replace it, and our veterans, our customers, will be treated with dignity. Always failure to do so will not be tolerated." Then he left. By the end of the day, emails were flying, directives updated, training modules flagged, regional heads briefed. But the real shift didn't start in a memo. It started the moment Arthur Harrison stood his ground, and someone at the top finally listened. The next morning, an internal memo circulated through every regional branch of First National Fidelity. Subject line: Veteran Account Protocol Overhaul, immediate action required. It wasn't a long document, just 2 paragraphs, but the message was clear: effective immediately. All staff would undergo retraining on veteran account procedures. Specialized directives once buried in policy manuals were now mandatory reading. Branch managers were instructed to hold workshops within the week. A new division was Announced small, focused, its mission streamline support for military pension accounts, ensure no automated system could delay essential funds, and assign human personnel to every flagged transaction involving a veteran. The memo ended with a quote, "Systems serve people, not the other way around." James Sterling. No one in the lobby that day cited, but the chain of changes across 4 states, 12 districts, and hundreds of employees had started with it at the edge of town in a modest second floor apartment. Arthur Harrison unlocked his door with steady hands. The envelope in his pocket still held the receipt from the transaction, $400 in cash, no delays, no holds. Inside, Martha sat near the window, a light blanket across her lap. The oxygen machine hummed softly. She turned as he entered, eyes lighting up. Arthur held up the paper bag with the stamp on it. She smiled. He crossed the room, set the bag on the table, and knelt beside her chair. No words, no speech, just a hand resting gently over hers. The medicine was on time, everything else could wait. Word of the first shift spread quickly. It began in quiet emails, then whispered hallway conversations, and by the following week, made its way into staff meetings, industry newsletters, and online forums. One manager in Des Moines called it the 7-minute shift. Another in Phoenix said, "I had my team read the full account, then asked them what they would have done differently." Not every branch had failed, but enough had grown complacent, and now that complacency had a name, a face, and a silent reprimand in the form of one man's dignity. Back at headquarters, Sterling didn't schedule press interviews, he didn't post statements online, but he did call Arthur once, just to check in, and the conversation was brief. They spoke of old exercises, of outdated radios and dusty logistics binders, not about banking, not about the incident, just two men who had once worn the same uniform. Now older, more tired, still holding the line in their own ways. Sterling called again 2 weeks later, no agenda, just asked how Martha was doing. Arthur replied that the new medication helped, that the stairs still creaked, that the world hadn't changed, but for once it had listened. They didn't speak long. Sterling had meetings, Arthur had pills to organize, but the calls continued, once a month, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, always quiet, always respectful. The teller, Kevin, completed his retraining. He wasn't dismissed, but he was transferred. His new role had no customer-facing duties. The memo cited inexperience under pressure. Kevin didn't fight it, he kept his head down and began again. Ms. Evans remained at the branch. She led the veteran policy seminar the following month. Her tone was sharper, less scripted. She kept a copy of Directive 7 Alpha pinned near her screen, not as a warning, but as a reminder. Arthur never told many people what happened. He didn't need to. His neighbors saw the change. The pharmacist noticed the frequency of pickups improved. The mail carrier once asked about the military photo in the hallway. Arthur had moved it closer to the front door. "I'd just like to see it," he said. Martha never asked about the hold. She didn't need the burden. All she knew was the medicine arrived, and that was enough. In the bank's next quarterly meeting, Sterling closed the session with an anecdote. He didn't name names, he didn't need to. He simply said, "Behind every policy is a person. Behind every flagged account is a story we haven't heard yet, and behind every failure to act is a second chance not taken." The room was quiet, no applause, just understanding. Arthur Harrison remained the same. He still walked to the bank on the first Tuesday of every month, still held the door open for others, still signed his slips in neat cursive, but something had changed, not in him, but around him. He no longer stood at the back of the line unseen. Now tellers greeted him by name, now no one asked him to explain twice. And in the silence between each transaction, one truth held steady: some systems don't fail because they're broken, they fail because they forget who they serve. But once in a while, when the right call is made and the right person answers, that failure becomes a reckoning, and respect, long overdue, finds its way back home. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition, some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry. And sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.